So today I have the pleasure of having Kim Hopkins with me. Dr. Ross Greene, the author of The Explosive Child, was kind enough to bring us together. And Kim, you are a clinical social worker. You've worked with behaviorally challenging kids for over 25 years, and you are the director of outreach for Dr. Ross Greene's nonprofit Lives in the Balance. So thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Great. So I'm a conscious parenting coach. So I work with a lot of parents who are having a hard time, with their children and their children's behavior. And in your years of experience, what would you say about the traditional discipline approach?
Yeah, which is everywhere, right? Although there is a nice wave of change happening that we're pleased to be a part of, because as parents, we're taught that the way to help our kids who are exhibiting behavior is to reward the things we like and consequence the things we don't like. If we really think about it, all that tells them is we like when you do this, we don't like when you do that. But they already knew we don't like that before they did it, and they did it anyway. Like, we teach our kids pretty young, right, that we don't hit each other pretty young, right? And yet some of you have kids who hit, but you've told them we don't hit. It doesn't feel good, right? It's unsafe, it's dangerous, but they're hitting anyway. We would also say that they're not waking up in the morning thinking, at approximately 10:17 this morning, I am going to hit my sibling with the nearest object I can find, right? And they know it's not okay, but it happens anyway. So we would say it's time to get curious. They know they're not supposed to do it. Life doesn't go so well for them when they're hitting. They don't want to be doing that. They're we're suffering for it. They're suffering more. So we need to figure out, how is it going that way? And in our minds, kids who exhibit concerning behavior in the face of problems, frustrations, do it because they lack the skills not to. And that's what 60 years of research tells us, that is finally making it into mainstream.
Yes. And that goes with Dr. Ross Greene's famous line, kids do well if they can, right?
Sure does.
A lot of us parents think that kids do well only if they want to. And that's just not the case. So there's a plan A, plan B, and plan C. Would you mind explaining that for us?
Sure. Yeah. We like to talk about how, first of all, it's important to have expectations as a parent. No doubt about it. Got to have expectations for your kids. We like the realistic variety based on the kid you've got, right? If you have an expectation that your child's meeting, you're good. You don't need a plan. You're good. We like to talk about what to do when you have expectations that your child is not meeting. Now you need a plan. We call them plans A, B, and C. You got 3 options at your disposal. Plan A is what we briefly mentioned. You can think of plan A as adult or authority. That's when the adult solves the problem unilaterally. We decide how it's going to go, right? And often that's when we're adding a consequence or something, right? I'm skipping plan B for a second. Plan C, C stands for child, if you want to remember it that way. That's when we might decide to consciously and deliberately set the problem aside temporarily. That's when we do the hard work to figure out all the times that our kids are exhibiting behavior, which we call unsolved problems or unmet expectations. All those unmet expectations or unsolved problems, we figure those out so our kid is predictable to us, so that we can make a conscious, deliberate decision. Gee, it's really hard for her to pick out her own clothes in the morning, and it leads to all these issues going to school. So, you know what? We're not going to even address that right now. We'll just pick out the clothes, right? Now, we're not teaching anything by doing that, but we are keeping things calm. The relationship is staying intact, right? And there are good reasons to do plan C. Plan C is not the model, but we like it. We don't find much use for plan A at all. There's so many downsides to plan A. Yes, we pursue our expectation, but the relationship takes a hit. We get no information from the kid about what made it hard to do in the first place. We're not doing any skills teaching, which is at the root of everything, right? So we're not big fans of plan A. Plan C we have use for, especially when we're being proactive and strategic and thinking it through, right? And then you got plan B. Plan B is synonymous with the collaborative and proactive solutions model. B, both. that's when you are going to pursue your expectation, but without all the downsides of plan A. If we do plan B with kids, we give them lots of experience in solving problems that affect their own lives. So we're teaching lots of skills without even having to think about it. It's baked into the steps of plan B. And we're pursuing our expectation, which is great. And the relationship strengthens, which is great.
Yes, it does. We just need to get curious as parents and, go behind the behavior, underneath the behavior. How do you help parents to stop being so reactive and more proactive? How do we get there? Because a lot of parents have a hard time not yelling, not snapping, not, jumping to that threat. It's so easy to just go to that threat. So what do you think, how do we get parents there in the first place?
I think the key is to take good care of ourselves, fill our own buckets, right? Keep in mind that kids do all that they can. A parent in our parents Facebook group a long time ago said, my mantra is that my kid is having a hard time, not giving me a hard time. So any little shift you can make that you can hold on to, right? But the big thing is do the work to make your child as predictable to you as possible. We call it figuring out their why, figuring out their when. Why do they respond so poorly to problems and frustrations? That's lagging skills. So we have a simple assessment to help you figure out what skills might they lack. You're taking your best guess in doing that. And then their when do they exhibit behavior in the face of problems and frustrations? Those are those unsolved problems we talked about, or unmet expectations, those predictable times when things likely won't go well. We're going to list them out because that then gives us this roadmap. Like now we collected it all. We have all the information. So now we can get ahead of this. Because really, a lot of models talk about what to do in the heat of the moment. That is the worst time to make progress.
Yes.
Rational thought is diminished. You're surprised, right? You have competing priorities. Proactive is really the best time to make progress. And so in order to be proactive, you got to know what you got to get ahead of, right? And then it's about prioritizing. What are we going to work on now? What are we going to plan C because we're not working on it, right? And kind of moving in that direction.
Yes. So when we react and we try to explain to our child what they did wrong in the heat of the moment while they're melting down, while they're having a tantrum, the child doesn't hear any of it. They're not, learning a lesson. But so what does the proactive way, how does that, enter the child's brain differently than that reactive way?
Sure. Well, that's their best way they know how to solve the problem, giving the skills they have, right? So we call this an upstream model where there's a community that sort of based on a fable, where there's a community that lives upstream and a community that lives downstream. Downstream community, they look over in the water, they see people are screaming for help. They're drowning. They go, oh my gosh, we got to help them, right? They're very busy. They do their best, right? Can't save everybody. But what they don't do is dry off and walk upstream and take the time to do this and say to the upstream community, how come people who cannot swim keep falling in the water? And if we focus our energy and attention upstream, we can prevent them from falling in the water. When kids are doing their behavior, they're in the water. And a lot of models are focused on like, what do they look like in the water? How often, right? Are they targeting anyone? And then how do we throw them a life ring that we hope they grab onto, but sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. No, our model is focused upstream. When you go upstream, you find problems that they don't have skills to solve. In other words, expectations that they don't have the skills to reliably meet. So if we can talk to kids outside of them having an unsolved problem or unmet expectation, then we can make progress. And so if you're talking to a kid, say, about their difficulty wearing their seatbelt when we're driving to grandma's, right? Then the time to talk about it's not in the car. The time to talk about it is not even right before we're leaving for grandma's. It's really like a day before, 2 days before, 3 days before. Like there's no heat, right? And you're trying to understand what is hard for them, right? You might hear something about how it cuts into their neck. Like you might hear some sort of sensory thing, right? that and I don't know what you'll hear, but that's what I've heard from a lot of kids, that there's some sort of way it feels, right? And that's why they're having a screaming fit and saying, I'm not going to wear my seatbelt. And then you're held hostage because you can't move the car, right? So, but if we can find out what about it doesn't work for them, their way to solve the problem is by screaming and saying, I'm not going, right?
Mhm.
They're telling us I'm not a great problem solver. They're drowning and they're saying I'm lacking skills to solve this in a way that's actually adaptive. So you come in as the partner and you go, oh, it's good for me to know that it feels like it's choking your neck, right? That's really good for me to know. And now you're ready to help them solve it in a more adaptive way, right? So you're going to tell them what worries you about the situation, right? Safety, right?
Mhm.
Pretty simple. So what could we do where this seatbelt, like, I wonder if there's a way we can do something about how the seatbelt is making you feel like you're choking in such a way that we're also safe riding at grandma's. Do you
Mhm.
have any ideas? Now we give kids first crack at it. They might not come up with anything. It takes skills. And
Mhm.
they already showed us what they came up with. What they came up with is throwing a fit, refusing to go, right? So if they can't come up with anything, you're the partner. Well,
Yeah.
I wonder, they make these pads that go over the seatbelt that, wouldn't blow our budget, that I think we could do. Would that be interesting to you? And the kid might say, well, what does it look like? Well, let me show you, right? Is it worth a try? Would that meet your concern? Would that meet mine? That's what we're trying to do here. Because when we do the plan A traditional discipline, kids lose, we win
Yeah.
because we have the power.
Yeah.
We're saying don't give up your power, just use it differently. And if you go
Mhm.
for a win-win, they'll work to meet your concern just like you're working to meet theirs.
Yeah. And I love how you said you come in as their partner, because that energy right there changes everything, right?
Yeah,
And one I know that Dr. Ross Green says, a lot of the times when our children act out or misbehave, it's them not being able to meet the expectations, like having difficulty meeting the expectations of the parent.
mm-hmm.
We have, such unrealistic expectations sometimes for our very young children. And that seems to be, step one of the issue, because we have these high expectations that they can't meet, and then they don't meet them. And then we punish them for it. So it's just this cycle. So how do we parents kind of learn to lower our expectations or start to see our children more where they developmentally are?
Sometimes it requires us to tune out the noise around us, putting pressure on us.
Yeah.
Not everybody has the same kid you have.
Mm-hmm.
And so really giving yourself, I find it very often is about giving ourselves permission
Yeah.
to think about our kid as a unique individual and respond accordingly. That's good parenting.
Yeah.
Having the same expectation as your neighbor has for their kid,
Yeah.
that's not good parenting, right? Being responsive to the hand you've been dealt, right? That's good parenting. Is that going to look different? Are you going to get looks? Yep. And, have your sort of get out of jail free card phrase, right? Like, this is why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because what we've learned is that he really struggles. And so we've made some adjustments to help him be more successful while we work on skill building, right? So realistic expectations are absolutely important. And the other thing to think about is what concern is driving the expectation? What
Mm-hmm.
is your kind of core so what worry that
Yeah.
makes you have this expectation? Because if it's, well, I don't know, it's how my parents did it, it might need some thinking. Or I don't know, that's how everybody else I see does it. Like, it might need some thinking. Like, what is your core so what? And usually we're only worried about a few things. We're worried about health, safety, learning. Those are sort of the typical ones, right? So if you can't kind of dial it back to that, that's a nice core, right? So what, then maybe think about that expectation, give it a little thought. Is it something you want to keep?
Yes. Yes. That's huge. I think, once we can steer away from these high expectations that you said are a lot of based on judgment from others and expectations of the culture, and just keeping our children ahead of the curve, and what others might think is just contaminating our minds and getting in the way of us really seeing our children for where they are at. Yeah. So do you have any thoughts on, I work with a lot of parents who have strong-willed children. I do this because a lot of parents believe they have strong-willed children when a lot of times it's really just counter will and a reaction to being, really pressured and pushed or coerced. So do you have experience working with counter-willed or strong-willed children? I'm sure you do.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. I've heard that many, many times, no doubt about it. And I think, we're taught as parents, like to have control, we have to take it, but
Mhm.
actually we
Mhm.
get more, we really can give it. Like, let's give some control. Let's, our kids, they're not robots. They have a unique set of thoughts and feelings. They have their own internal world, which could be very different than our own. So let's get a little insight into it. Let's ask questions. Let's be curious, right? I call it being a detective. And like, sometimes we're very surprised to learn how they think about something. We can observe their feelings, we can observe their behavior, but we cannot observe how they perceive something. And if we are able to get that information, even from kids who don't have language, even from young kids, we can work to do that. There's ways to adjust the model to do that. We get a little grain of insight. We go, oh, that's what you're thinking, which is why you feel frustrated, which is why you behave the way you do. We can address the thinking and make it work for them, right? Um, yeah, so there's so much more to say, but I'll pause there.
Thank you. It's so true. Getting to the need behind it is what gets us through. But, just putting a Band-Aid on the behavior isn't really solving anything. Um, Also, lastly, I just want to go a little deeper into how the parent-child relationship, how this affects our child's behavior. I really focus on this because I think it's the core of everything. And yeah, I would just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, when we're parenting the traditional way with Plan A, the relationship takes a hit
Mhm.
and honesty decreases. Plan A does not breed honesty because what Plan A sets up is this adversarial relationship where kids look at us and they go, "How do I work around you? Because you stand between me and everything I like to do." Right.
Mhm.
So how do I work around you? That's not breeding honesty, right? Plan B or the CPS model, now we're breeding honesty because we're listening and there's no risk, there's no consequence coming, there's no risk in talking, which sometimes we have to convince kids is the case if they've had a lot of experience with Plan A, right? And we're working hard to listen. We're actively listening. We're reflecting back what they're saying. We're summarizing what they're saying. We're asking for more, making sure we actually go, oh, now we get it, right? Um, then we can make the request that they listen to our one sentence about what worries us, and then we're working together to pick a solution that doesn't just work for us. Sometimes kids will give an idea of a solution that works for us but not them, and then
Mhm.
if we say it's so powerful in the relationship for us to say, well, that's an idea, the thing about that is that does nothing to help you with what you said about not liking the feel of food on dirty plates when you're loading them in the dishwasher. So we actually want to do something about that,
Mhm.
not just what I want, because they're used to the parent wins, right? So when you're going for this win-win, honesty is bred. There's no risk in speaking their truth, right? And they're going to see you as a problem-solving partner. I remember when my daughter, she was a decent sleeper, and then at age 4, not so much. And so I needed my sleep. So I did a Plan B conversation with her. I figured out what was hard. We came up with an idea and we decided, okay, we're going to try this idea and see if it works. Now, there's no guarantee, right? But we're going to see if it works and we're going to come back together if it doesn't. So my husband came home from work that night and she said, Daddy, we have a new plan for nighttime. And if it doesn't work, that's okay because we'll just learn from it and figure out a new plan if we need to. That is what we want our kids to be thinking about us. Like there's no risk if I mess up because I have somebody to come back to help me learn from it and figure out how things can go better.
Wow, that's huge and that's beautiful at 4 years old, Wow. Wow. Yeah, we can all learn from this. Thank you so much. This has been, I'm sure, so insightful for so many parents and eye-opening. Thank you so, so much for your time. And can you let parents know where they can find you or more about Lives in the Balance?
Yes, sure. So we have a website and it's livesinthebalance.org. Dr. Greene started the nonprofit for two reasons. One is to give away the model for free. So you'll find a ton of resources on there, things you can download, videos to watch, audio stuff, maybe even a little too many resources to learn the model, because it is quite a shift for some folks. It was for me. I was not trained this way. So you can find us at Lives in the Balance, check out all the resources. The second thing you'll find there is our advocacy work. We're working on behalf of kids who exhibit behaviors and their parents and their educators and their service providers to try to fix the system because it's not working for anybody. So yeah, you can find out a lot of stuff there. Join us if you're interested in advocacy efforts and learn from others as you embark on this journey. And thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. It was an honor. Take good care and
You too.
keep up the great work. Thank
Thank you. You as well.
you so much. Take care.